Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, we're going to continue diving into expected to announce head coach David Quinn, and we're going to learn about his tenure with the Rangers with Jon Chik of the Locked On Rangers podcast. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm JD Young, host of Locked On Sharks, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now and Fear the Fin. And of course, I want to thank you guys for making us your first listen. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, today's episode is sponsored by BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered this season more props, odds, and lines than before. BetOnline, where the game starts. But we have Jon Chik, who covers the Locked On Rangers, has been doing it for a little while. John, this is the first time we've done a crossover. We've both been with Locked On for a little while now, haven't we?
Yeah, I believe it is, though. I mean, we were talking, just before we hit record here. I know at one time, there were 3 hosts for Locked On Sharks and down to 2, and now you're rolling solo there. So, you guys do a great job with your show, and I've always been kind of hoping we could link up, and now we actually have a reason to. The Sharks hiring David Quinn.
Yeah, supposedly hired, and they still haven't announced it, even though it's everybody knows. But I liked on their press release, they're like, "Yep, we're announcing our new coach on Tuesday, but we're not telling you who it is, even though everybody in the world knows." So, we wanted to get you on because, of course, you've covered the Rangers for a while. You've seen the David Quinn era through and through. So, let's start with kind of what the Rangers looked like before he got there and kind of his tenure. I know they were kind of a struggling team, and he was brought in to be kind of help steer the rebuild. But what would you kind of describe his time in New York?
Yeah, I mean, definitely something of a mixed bag. Obviously when he was hired, the letter had already gone out from, the Rangers upper management and talking about how, they basically just admitted they came clean about it. We're going to trade all your favorite players, all these guys you love, and we're going full-fledged tear down rebuild. And, on one hand, it's an unfortunate time to be a Ranger fan because all your favorite players are leaving. But on the other, I think that kind of honesty is refreshing. And I'll be honest, like when they first hired David Quinn, my reaction was, who's David Quinn? Because he's not somebody that's really been in the NHL. I think he was an assistant coach for the Avalanche very briefly for like a portion of a season, like 10 or 12 years ago. But, they brought him in, obviously a strong track record in college hockey. And I can appreciate the fact that the Rangers, went with a little bit of a bold selection. I did a crossover a while back with Jay Forrester of Locked On Blue Jackets. And Jay made the point that, he feels it's almost like in the NHL, there's like 35 coaches that just kind of get recycled and just kind of move around the league. So, yeah. So when they hired Quinn, I was like, all right, well, it's a little bit of a bold hire, and it is a complete teardown rebuild. So he's going to be given some rope here. And, whatever they do the first season, he's going to survive that. There's no way he'll be one and done because it's a complete rebuild. And I think, he got these guys eventually, all pulling in the same direction. Toward the end of his second season there, they were one of the hottest teams in the league before everything was postponed due to COVID. And then the third season, I mean, we'll get into this stuff in greater detail later, but everything that could go wrong went wrong. And a lot of it wasn't really his fault. So again, a little bit of a mixed bag, and somebody that I think under his watch, the team really kind of came together, but I don't know that he was ever really that coach. Like, did I ever look at Quinn and think like, man, Stanley Cup champion coach? I'll be honest, I did not. Now he might prove me completely wrong, and we'll see what happens there. And this clip might resurface a couple of years from now if you guys are winning the cup. But yeah, I mean,
if we're winning the cup, I am telling everybody and anybody who's ever doubted the Sharks ever, yes. But yeah, I mean, because like I on Friday's episode, I dug into kind of the Rangers and kind of like their offensive rankings and stuff like that, and like the season before, they got shut down, they were like 5th in scoring. Their defense was okay, but like the power play was good. They were getting decent, amount of shots on goal. So like, it seemed like things were kind of coming together for them. And then, like you said, everything that went wrong could go wrong in the 20 and, the weird bubble season that he didn't survive. So do you think maybe like, well, let's so what went wrong in that last season, in the bubble season?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I mean, to begin with, you had the Tony DeAngelo situation that happened only like 5 or 6 games into the year, and
Yeah.
he's getting into a fight with his own goalie, and the Rangers are putting him on waivers, and he never comes back to the team. So you had that. Quinn and the rest of his coaching staff actually got COVID and had to miss 6 games. So I mean, that's completely out of his hands. There's nothing he could do there.
Especially when you've
You
only
had
played 56 games. Yeah, that's like an eighth of your schedule right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they had this like makeshift coaching staff. The AHL coach, Drury was like an assistant coach during that time. But yeah, that happened. You had that weird thing with Artemi Panarin where that political hit piece was put out against him, so they were missing him for 3 weeks. Which, to your point, again, a greater percentage of your season than in other seasons. And then toward the end, you had everything that happened with Tom Wilson, and you had
I
Jeff
forgot
Gorton,
about
the general
that. Yeah,
manager.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you remember all that chaos?
Right. I
Yeah.
remember that now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he was the coach for that. That turned out to be about his 5th to last game ever. But, after that, Jeff Gorton was fired in the immediate aftermath of that. He was the general manager. John Davidson, the team president, was fired. And at that point, they let Quinn finish the season, but the writing was on the wall. I just didn't think he was going to be back. And again, I do think he did some good things and got this team pointed in the right direction. You mentioned the power play not too long ago, but defensively, they were kind of a mess under Quinn. And, part of that is the inexperience and the youth. They were all kind of figuring it out and all getting used to playing with each other, I'm sure. But, yeah, team anti-structure, basically, under David Quinn for a while there.
All right. So what? All right. So, you described it like how he did some stuff well. What do you think is kind of his best asset, or like what do you think he brings to the table?
Yeah, I think overall, he obviously had a lot of success in the college ranks, and I'm actually looking at your depth chart here. I mean, I stands to reason that the Sharks have a pretty young team, but I'm
They
looking
do.
at this, and yeah, everybody's like in their 20s basically. There's like 3 or 4 guys that are over 30, but I think he would work better with a roster of younger players because my understanding is that, and this is just going by people that cover the team, they're in the locker room and they're really plugged in. But my understanding is that Quinn is a little bit of a micromanager where, he's kind of like keeping tabs on these guys all the time. Not the worst thing in the world, but I think this Ranger team responded a little bit better to Gerard Gallant, who, if they have a day off and they're away from the rink, he just kind of lets them do whatever they want to do and all that stuff. He's not kind of like keeping close tabs on them. And, I wonder maybe if Quinn has kind of learned his lesson there that, he's not coaching in college anymore. He's got, full grown adults here, guys who've been playing professional hockey for, in some cases, many, many years. And he might, pull back the reins just a little bit there. But my understanding is that, some of the players that wasn't their favorite thing about David Quinn, that it kind of felt like he was always kind of like watching them like a hawk, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. All right. Before we continue, and we're going to get into kind of how Quinn treats young players and how Quinn treats older players. Let's take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. You guys know BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in all your betting needs. They've got your favorite sports and events and the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball. NFL starts next month, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. They continue to be the top online resource for all your favorite sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening right now. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so a lot of Sharks fans right now, there's a lot of rumors that David Quinn doesn't like young players. We've heard, especially with like Capo Caco, who seemed pretty happy that Quinn left, because in his words, he felt like, you make one mistake, you're going to the 4th line. And Sharks have already been living this with Bob Bugner, especially with a lot of their young players, Jonathan Dahlen, who is no longer with the Sharks. Ryan Merkley, he would get benched for, plenty of time. And of course, we have our one precious William Eklund, who's making the jump back over. Should we be worried about William Eklund and his playing time?
No, again, I think it's a situation where he'll probably learn from those mistakes. And William Eklund is obviously somebody that you have to play. As you alluded to, though, JD, when he was on the Rangers, one of the things that he would come under fire for as far as Ranger fans are concerned was just what you mentioned there, man. And, not playing Capo Caco in a prominent role, not playing Alexis Lafreniere in a prominent role. And it's one thing if like you have like this awesome team and you're a Stanley Cup contender and the kids aren't quite there yet. Maybe you limit their playing time a little bit, but during that time, the Rangers weren't that good of a team. I mean, I don't know how else to say it really. So you should be able to find, at least 2 spots in the top 9 at the very least for Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere. And they didn't always do that. A lot of times they were banished to the 4th line and they're out there with guys, like Greg McKegg or, whoever it might be. And that's just not the way to develop young players, which is what the Rangers should have been doing, during the first year or 2 of Quinn's tenure. So that's definitely something where I think he needs to improve, and I think he will. And then, you mentioned, the benchings or, the demotions to the 4th line. The thing that I didn't like there, it felt like he had like his certain players that, it was kind of a double standard where like the 2 that really come to mind are Ryan Strome and Pavel Buchnevich. If one of those 2 took a stupid penalty, looked asleep out there, just kind of had a sluggish shift, whatever it might be, they'd be benched and they wouldn't see the ice the rest of the game. And then like somebody else would do something. Like there was a game I remember, Chris Kreider took like just a really lazy hooking penalty in the neutral zone. And I was texting my parents because they're big Ranger fans too. And they're like, I texted them. I was like, dude, if Buchnevich did that, he'd be benched for 2 weeks. So like,
it just shot into the sun. You're never seeing him again.
Exactly. You're a healthy scratch. Make room for Greg McKegg here. But that just bothered me a little bit. It just felt like there was a little bit of a double standard and now maybe he's trying to push the right buttons with those young players, Buchnevich or Strome or whoever it might be. And he's trying to light a fire under them and trying to challenge them a little bit. I mean, that could have something to do with it. But by that same token, certain players would face his wrath a lot more than other players would,
Wow, this sounds very familiar to Bob Bugner, because the same thing, like, Ryan Merkley make like a bad pinch or something like that. And, he's trying to make a play, like the Sharks would be down 4-0. There's one, I always remember, the Sharks down 4-0. Ryan Merkley's trying to make a pinch in, the offensive zone to try to keep the offense going. And of course, the puck kind of squirts past him and, which leads to a breakaway. And then we don't see Ryan Merkley for the rest of the game. And it's like, you're down 4-0 right now. The dude's trying to make some offense. And then Brent Burns, who, like, God forbid Brent Burns, if, he does something terrible, makes the same play, he's back out there for the next shift. He's going to play 28 minutes a night type of thing. And yes, Brent Burns has definitely earned that, leeway where, being a former Norris winner, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that does feel very similar to what we've seen before with Sharks coaches.
Yeah. Actually, JD, I want to ask you real quick, man, because I'm sure Ranger fans will be interested in this because, Quinn was very polarizing to say the very least. But I mean, how do Sharks fans in general feel about this? And how do you feel about this? And was there anybody you would have wanted more than David Quinn? Was there anybody you had your eye on or anything like that?
I'm trying to be level-headed as possible because I know Sharks Twitter and stuff right now is absolutely on fire about this. They are not very happy, and I think especially too because, with Sharks fans the team is going through a rebuild without actually fully admit like we're going through a rebuild. They're trying to play that game of like, let's see if we can kind of, thread the needle and have our old core. And then we have a bunch of young guys that we're really excited with, like Bordelot, and then you have Eklund, and then they have, the rest of their 2020 draft class who's going to be playing in the AHL this year. So we, Sharks fans in general, we wanted someone who can kind of help develop these guys. And the name that came out was Warsofsky, the coach of the Chicago Wolves, the AHL affiliate for the Carolina Hurricanes. And, he just won the Calder Cup there. We know, like with those AHL coaches, they're, how the AHLs, you're having stuff thrown at you all the time because guys getting pulled up, and he's developed a winning culture, and he's knows how to develop these young guys. And that's what I think a lot of fans were hoping for, was like one of these kind of AHL coaches who've been able to develop and get guys ready for the NHL, and having somebody like that kind of, especially with like I said, when you have Eklund and you have Bordelot and Ozzy Weisblatt and Tristan Robbins and a bunch of these guys who are going to be starting to make their debuts here soon, like having a coach who can kind of help these guys along is I think where Sharks fans were really at. And like I said, I'm trying to be level-headed with it and be like, okay, because we see this all the time with coaches, right? Where they go to their first job and it's hard to be a coach, and like you're trying to do everything at once, and you get fired. And I think a lot of times, like especially you get that year to kind of step back, reevaluate what you did and what you did well and what you didn't do well. And I think, I'm hoping that he learns from those mistakes. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it makes you feel any better, if it makes Sharks fans feel any better, you look at the Rangers' current coach, it's Gerard Gallant. Things didn't really go all that great at his first job with Columbus, but everywhere he's been there since, he's won. I mean, I realize he kind of got a bad deal both in Florida as well as in Vegas, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you're just not quite ready, or you might not be aware of some of the things that you don't know, and sometimes it can click with a second opportunity. So we'll see. I'm definitely gonna be pulling for him. I mean, I didn't dislike David Quinn. It's just a situation where, once he was fired and Gerard Gallant was there, it was kind of like, oh yeah, we just upgraded,
And
So.
I mean, whenever I'm excited for you guys to be, in 2 years to have him replaced by Pete DeBoer, because that seems to be the natural cycle of, Gerard Gallant getting replaced by Pete DeBoer. But then you'll go to the finals your first year, because that's what he does. So Pete DeBoer takes your team to the finals in his first year. So
and then it goes south after that. Yeah.
Oh, of course. I'm not promising anything after year one. So before we finish up, just want to let you guys know, of course, when you're done listening to this episode, make sure you guys go check out the Locked On NHL show. They've got you covered 5 days a week with everything going on, especially right now, the Matthew Tkachuk trade. I'm sure the Monday episode is going to be insane. Where were you Friday night when that sucker went down?
Man, I was like half asleep, to the point that like when I saw it, I thought like, oh, somebody's just screwing around. It's one of those fake accounts, and
Yeah.
You know how it is. People always do that. I almost fell for one not that long ago with the Rangers, but pretty crazy, man. Kachuk to the Panthers, and Huberdeau, Uyghur, and the rest of the every asset that the Panthers have to the Flames. Pretty crazy.
Yeah,
right?
I was at a baseball game, and I was like, oh wow, this is fun. So but yeah, so Locked On NHL, they've got you covered. I'm sure they're going to be breaking down the Kachuk trade, and as close as the NHL is going to get to the NBA offseason. So John, before we get out of here, we've talked a lot about the young players. How does Quinn kind of go with the veterans? Because the Sharks do have a fair amount of veterans. You have Erik Karlsson, who's going to be kind of taking the reins now in the defensive zone with Brent Burns gone. You have Tomas Hertl, you've got Logan Couture, you've got Timo Meier, who's he's still only 25, but he's been playing forever, and he's gonna be looking for a new deal. How does he kind of work with these veteran guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Rangers, he did a nice job with them. He set them up in positions to succeed, and I think his line combinations tended to make sense more often than not. With Quinn and with a lot of coaches in the NHL, they just seem to have more trust, and they just favor the veterans a little bit more than some of the younger guys. I think that was kind of the case with David Quinn. Like I mentioned, there were times where, either Kako or Lafreniere were banished to the fourth line, which is something that you don't want to see. I mean, to be fair, Gerard Gallant didn't name a captain either, but they never named a captain under David Quinn. And I know some people kind of held that against him. I mean, for me, I think it's probably high time for the Rangers to finally name a captain. But by that same token, it's his decision. And he did kind of empower some of the veterans. If you look at the alternate captains under David Quinn, they were all the veterans.
Like 6 alternate captains right now or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, including our boy, Barclay Goodrow.
Yeah. Well, I was joking, too, on my show. Like, imagine, if the Rangers actually win the Cup. Like, what? Alternate captain Chris Kreider come get the Stanley Cup. Yeah, all 6 of them go out there, right?
Like an ant carry, like a bunch of ants carrying something.
How funny would that be, right? They just, for one reason or another, they just couldn't decide on a captain. But I think for the most part, he kind of empowered, guys like Panarin, guys like Zibanejad, guys like Kreider to kind of lead the room a little bit. I mean, he gave them the alternate captaincy at least, and again, he's just one of those coaches that seems to favor the veterans a little bit, and everything else being equal, he's going to give more minutes to the guys that have been there as opposed to some of the young kids.
Makes sense. So earlier we talked about like how, like we saw the offense improving for the Rangers and stuff like that. What do you think was his kind of the one thing he can hang his hat on during his tenure in with the Rangers?
I think more than anything, it's the team chemistry that was established under his watch. And I don't know if that would have just happened no matter who the coach was. I mean, maybe these guys just kind of hit it off or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, they really kind of came together. And again, this team was kind of in chaos for a while. You had to go through the entire rebuild. And it just seemed like under Quinn's watch, this group really came together very nicely. And I think that's carried over into Gerard Gallant's tenure as well. The Rangers, you just watch them interact with each other. It's pretty obvious that it's a very close knit bunch. These guys really play for each other. They'd run through a wall for each other. And, you look at the run that they had in the playoffs this past season, being down 3-1 against the Penguins, come back and win that series. Being down 2-0 against the Canes, come back and win that series. And then, obviously they didn't beat the Lightning, but they gave them a good run for their money. All those games were close, except for maybe like one of them. So, again, I think he just kind of brought, under his watch, this team just kind of really gelled. They have each other's backs. And, again, I think that's carried over into the Gerard Gallant tenure here. I mean, I think Gallant, again, he is the best coach for the job, and he's kind of picked up where Quinn left off and has probably elevated them to a level where I'm not so sure Quinn could have taken them. But the one thing that he didn't have to do, didn't have to worry about too much, was establish, that chemistry in the locker room, which is so important in sports. I know everything's analytical these days, and all these different algorithms say that this team's going to beat that team, right? But man, like anybody that's played sports, like man, I mean, it means everything. If you've got a team where everybody has that camaraderie, it's absolutely huge, and I think that happened under David Quinn's watch.
Yeah, and you wonder too, especially where the Sharks, there's been whispers, especially with the whole Vander Kane situation, where people didn't get along when he was there, and you heard last year just how much happier it seemed like the locker room was, especially with, I know they weren't winning a lot of games last year, but just kind of guys got along together better. So hopefully with the Sharks, where they do have a lot of kind of established guys who've been there for a while, and you can kind of come in and help some of the new guys that are going to be coming in. Mike Greer has spent a lot of this offseason trying to kind of fortify that bottom six, which has been kind of a revolving door of who's who type of guys, and guys who are maybe not quite NHL caliber, or rookies who are just not quite ready to kind of contribute. So hopefully Quinn can kind of help do that. So and other than the kind of playing not playing young guys in prominent roles, what do you think is the one other thing that he kind of really needs to work on?
Yeah, I would say probably just we talked about this a little bit before, but I would say just pull back the reins a little bit. Don't feel like you have to micromanage every little thing around the team. Let them be who they are, and don't be so trigger happy with the constant line jugglings, the constant demotions, not constant, but the occasional benchings. Just a little bit too trigger happy with that. And I think for a young team especially, the last thing you want is for these guys to be out there playing scared and being terrified of making a mistake and thinking, oh man, if I turn the puck over, I'm going to be benched the rest of the game. That's no good. I mean, the Sharks just aren't going to come along if that's the case, if they're out there afraid to make a mistake. So again, I hope that Quinn, he's a little bit tough, and he can still be tough. And I think there's times where, a benching does send the right message, or a demotion does send the right message. I just think he went to the well a little too often when he was with the Rangers. And for your sake, JD, and for the sake of Sharks fans, hopefully he doesn't do that quite as much in the future for you guys there.
John, you've said it all. Where can the people find you, and where can they find Locked On Rangers, of course?
Yes, so you can find me anywhere you get your podcasts. As far as finding me on Twitter, at JChick17. The handle for the show is at LO_NY_Rangers. And you can get, wherever you're hearing this podcast, you can hear Locked On Rangers as well. So how about you, JD? Where can the Ranger fans find you?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter at MyFryhole, the show, wherever you get podcasts as well, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, and then Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can find the show at Locked On Sharks, where I'm doing all that as well. Please subscribe on YouTube. So that'll be it. For the rest of this week, we've got, of course, we're going to react to David Quinn's opening press conference. We have a couple guests lined up as well, so make sure you guys are all locked in for that. John, thanks, buddy.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me. We'll have to do this again.
Yes.